Turn to Romans chapter 1. In the book of Romans, we have the book written to the people in the city of Rome, which was metropolitan pagan. They believed that the Caesar was divine. They had 12 gods, as the Greeks had. You have paganism, also atheism. There is no God. We talked a little bit about worldviews. So there are many different worldviews in the world. And the book of Romans in chapter 1 is saying that God has not left us without a witness. Verse 17, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith. I'd like you to do a short study on the righteousness, this word, righteousness of God, then righteousness of man. And do you know the difference? Turn to Romans 10. This is your Romans 10:3. You've got two righteousnesses mentioned in these two. Romans 1:17, Romans 10:3. One is righteousness of God, the other one the righteousness of man, or establishes their own righteousness. Do you know the difference when they establish their own righteousness versus the righteousness of God? Use some Bible verses. Do a study on that right now. Work on that with your neighbor. And what is the difference between the two? Okay, go ahead. You have a few minutes. Here's another point. Numbers, this story, Numbers 15:32 to verse 36. Yeah, Numbers 15:32 to 36. Look at that. And while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man that gathered sticks upon the Sabbath day. They that found him gathering sticks brought him unto Moses and Aaron and unto all the congregation. They put him in ward because it was not declared what should be done to him. And the Lord said unto Moses, the man shall be surely put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones without the camp. And all the congregation brought him without the camp and stoned him with stones. And he died, as the Lord commanded Moses. What is the meaning of that story? God is holy. You cannot work on the Sabbath. But he was gathering sticks probably to make a fire for his family, to cook food, to work, to do that on the Sabbath day, but it was against the law. Okay, so what is the point of the word righteousness? Right. What is right? What is... When we say that God is righteous, he's perfect in a moral way. We say more morally when somebody is correct or somebody is right. But in Romans, this is a big subject, but in a lot of religion, it is not a big subject. Righteousness is not that important. You can lie, cheat, and be immoral and still be religious. But with God, in the book of Romans, we read that it's really a big issue. Go back to Romans with me. And chapter 1, we see pagan people that turned away from God, and then they became idolatrous. They worshipped idols. They also lived immorally. So the Jew could say, that's pagan. Those are pagan people. They are living immorally. But then if you turn to Romans 2, we see the Greeks also lived immorally. Romans chapter 2, we have here from, well, actually, you've got 17, a Jew, and he teaches, he's a teacher. Verse 18, 19, 20. Then we have the Greek in verse 27 or 26. If the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision be counted for circumcision? This is a Greek person who is living morally by law written in his heart. But this is the righteousness of man, because man, so the third category is Romans 3, the Jew. I mean, we have the pagan, we have reference to the Jew in chapter 2, we have also chapter 3. So we have really three kinds of people. We have pagans, Gentiles that are Greek, they are civilized. I think you are following this with me. Pagans who are uncivilized, Greeks that are civilized, and then Jews that are scriptural. And all of them are unrighteous. This is chapter 3 in verse 10. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. So we have a principle that's very important in our theology, and it has to do with God's nature, that God is righteous and man is not. We say that we have sinned, that our nature is unrighteous. So we go about to establish our own righteousness. Can anybody give me an example of how we do that? What's that? Okay, we please God by our work, by our effort. We establish a code of discipline, activity, work, dedication, or devotion. We draw it like this, that in time I perform somehow so that I make progress and I establish my own righteousness, fasting, prayer, going to the synagogue, behavior. And by the law that God gave man, like gathering sticks on the Sabbath, strictly speaking, if you broke the law once in any point, then you're guilty of all of it. Turn to James 2 with me. chapter 2, verse 10. If you go about to establish your own righteousness, but then you in one point break it, then you're guilty of all. Chapter 2, verse 10. That is, any law, the law that is set up by God, or even the law that is written in my heart. If I break it in any one point, then I am guilty of all of it, of breaking all of it. So the beginning of the book of Romans is about man's need for righteousness, but he cannot find it. So he establishes his own, and he compares. This is Luke 18. Would you turn there with me? Luke chapter 18, verse 9. I'm talking too much, but okay, verse 18:9. And he spake this parable unto certain which trusted in themselves. This is the problem. There's three things mentioned. Trusted in themselves. Next thing was they were righteous, that they were righteous. And number three, they despised others. Do you see that? Luke 18:9. Do a little work on that right now, okay? Read it a couple times and talk to your neighbor about it. Self-righteousness. How is it characterized? Any comment? God's righteousness versus self-righteousness. What's the difference?
Self-righteousness is inward.
Inward? Okay, Sidoni? Ooh, that's a big breakthrough right there. That's something we're going to get to. It's imputed. It has to be given to us. And what is it? The righteousness of God. What is that? Christ, yes. 1 Corinthians 1:30. Christ is our righteousness. This is the Spirit of God, the righteousness of God, the nature of God, the holiness of God. There's a couple words that we can use that are very similar. That God is holy. That God is He sanctifies, makes us holy. We are righteous because it is legally imputed to us. But without that, we establish our own righteousness. Can we turn to Matthew 23 and do a little work there? Turn to Matthew 23. This is a chapter, the whole chapter is on the self-righteousness of the Pharisees. And just read that chapter and underline little parts where you can see they establish their own righteousness by their religion. What do you see in that chapter? Blindness. Another word? Pride. Okay. Self-righteousness. Hypocrisy. Yeah. Appearances. Did they take the law of Moses and establish their own righteousness? So could we say that something like this, that here's the law of Moses, and they kind of established their own righteousness? You know, when you're to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, but they really can't. So what did they do? It looked like they did, but they couldn't really. And what were some of these presentations or appearances of righteousness? The appearances were their robes, phylacteries, long prayers, saying, Rabbi, Rabbi. What else? Paying tithes of their spices. What was it, Tony? Desiring the best seat, looking for honor. And when they established their own righteousness, then this was misleading because they were not submitted to the righteousness of God. Do you ever remember reading that? Isn't it Romans 10:3? Like, turn there with me. Romans 10:3. For they being ignorant of God's righteousness and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. You know? So they were okay with the substitute. And this is where, Jesus has an issue with these people and is saying, you have to be submitted to God, and God has to give you His righteousness. And this is in Romans chapter 3, at the end of Romans 3. Verse 21. Let's read it out loud together, shall we? Chapter 3, verse 21. Ready? But now the righteousness of God without the law is manifested, being witnessed by the law and the prophets, even the righteousness of God, which is by faith of Jesus Christ, unto all and upon all them that believe. For there is no difference. For all have sinned, let me say, pagan, Greek, and Jew, and they all come short of the glory of God. So look up there on the screen. The Jew, this is the Jew, he has failed in not knowing the righteousness of God. It must be given to us. It cannot be produced by this man here. He cannot get it this way. We covered that. It has to be given to us. And it's by faith. And it's when we come to Christ by faith. This is the amazing thing. We come to Jesus, and it's just by faith. And the righteousness of God is revealed. See, this is manifested or revealed to us. This is when you are born again and the Spirit of God comes into your heart and you realize that God is holy, God is true, God is real. This is the righteousness of God revealed to us by faith in Him. By faith in Him. And it is, as Sidoni said, there's two words for it. One is imparted or imputed. Imputed. And we will speak about that, and that is a legal imputation. And the other word is imparted. This is experienced by you in your life now. You experience the righteousness of God. To be righteous is amazing, and we are by His grace through His work on the cross. It's ours. So Okay, would anybody like to summarize what we've covered so far? Just kind of stand up and address the class. As a teacher, I've made the mistake of asking a question, giving them the opportunity. I can't bear the awkwardness of the silence, so I keep talking. But as a teacher, I've learned to be quiet and wait a long time. So I can wait longer than you can. Thank you, Jesus. Yes, Jacob.
The whole thing is that God is righteous and man is not. So that's pretty much all of it.
Wow. That was awesome. Hey, you can't get any better than that. That was awesome. Yeah. That's so good. That's it. Really. You know, God is righteous. We are not. We can't get there by ourselves. Does anybody know where that is written, where how can a clean thing come out of an unclean thing? Turn to Job 15. I think this is what Jacob said just now. There's many verses. Let's take a few minutes and go through, and you can shout out to me too. Verse 14, Job 15:14. What is man that he should be clean? And he which is born of a woman that he should be righteous. Verse 16. How much more abominable and filthy is man, which drinks in iniquity like water. Yeah, that's not the one I was thinking. But it makes a good point nevertheless. Anybody know? How about Jeremiah 13? Okay. 23, Jeremiah 13:23. Can the Ethiopian change his skin, or the leopard his spots? Then may you also do good that are accustomed to do evil. It's still not the one I'm looking for. But same thing. I am unclean and I cannot bring out of my heart a clean thing. I can't. Yes. Job 14:4. Oh, that's it. Who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? Not one. What's the point then? It must be imputed. Does anybody know the chapter where we read about imputation? Yes, that's it. Romans 5. Now notice Romans 1, Romans 2, Romans 3, we have the subject of righteousness. Isn't it at the very core of our theology that God, Jacob said it, God is righteous, man is not. How can he become righteous? It must be given to him by God. But God has a problem giving it to us because we are wrong. And I think you understand the problem, don't you? The problem is that you are wrong and we are wrong and God is right. So how can he make us right? How can it happen? You know? Yes, Jesus, that's right. There's principles in our theology. Here are some of the words, the big words that we use: justification, sanctification, propitiation, redemption, forgiveness, and do you have those words? Okay. And then, let's see, redemption. Do we have that one in there? Reconciliation. Reconciliation, okay. Reconciliation. And atonement. Let's see, justification, yeah. Okay. So this is the work that God, this is all, like, these are legal words, and they're like really awesome in their meaning. And every one of them has a little bit of a different meaning to it. And we're like studying that and talking about it, teaching it. Okay, look at Romans chapter 3 and verse. We read 22, 23, 24. 24. Being justified freely. So here's this word, justified. Freely. Verse 25. Whom God has set forth to be a propitiation. This is the next word here, propitiation. Through faith in his blood, to declare the righteousness for the remission of sins that are past through the forbearance of God. To declare, I say at this time, his righteousness, that he might be just and the justifier of him which believes in Jesus. Where is boasting then? Verse 27. After he mentions these words, he says, where is boasting? What do you think that means? What? Yeah, what does it mean? Where is boasting then? Yeah, that's what it means, but what is the meaning behind that? Why did he say, where is boasting then? Nobody, like who can say you did anything? It's like this one back here. This one. Where is your boasting about, I made it up these steps? Where is boasting if you have these words here? These words. Where is boasting? Where do you get the credit? Where are you congratulated? There is no congratulations in these words for you in terms of your works and your efforts and your sincerity and commitment and dedication and discipline. None of this happened by our goodness because we are unrighteous. And this meaning of unrighteousness is in an absolute sense. We are unrighteous. It means really we are. I mean, really we are unrighteous. You see, the problem is that people behave well in their own righteousness, 23, Mark 7, 21 and 23. In our own righteousness, I behave. I'm like a hypocrite. I behave well. I do the right thing in front of people. I establish my own righteousness. And there are a lot of very good moral people, but those people cannot go to heaven. It's not possible because God sees behind our shell. And he says, I know if I put you in this situation, you'll not make it. If I tempt you enough, you will not make it, because I know what is in your heart. And what is in your heart cannot make it. You do not have my righteousness. So I have done it for you. I have made you righteous. Now, look at Romans 4 for a second. We're going to take a break in a minute, but Romans chapter 4. And I want you to see from verse 1 to verse 7, verse 8. Romans 4, verses 1 to 8. Read that and talk to your neighbor about this point of what justification means by faith. Abraham believed God without works before he was circumcised. David believed God and he was declared righteous. How do you become righteous? By faith, yeah. What did Abraham do? He believed, right? And then what happened? It was counted to him for righteousness, or he was imputed. It was charged to his account that he was a righteous man. But was he a righteous man? No, he was like you and me. He was a sinner. But God declared him righteous when really he wasn't. But how could God do that? It doesn't seem right. That a man that is a criminal would be set free, a man that is wrong would be forgiven. How could God do that? Because God is righteous, right? If God is righteous, how could he violate his righteousness by saying it's okay. It's okay, you're free. And everybody's looking at God saying, how can you do that? I thought you were righteous. And the Lord will say, yeah, he is worthy of death. He's worthy of condemnation. He's worthy of going to hell. I could send him to hell, but I'm not going to. I'm going to do the opposite. And we say to the Lord, how can you do that? Right? It'd be like emptying the jail in Baltimore City and going into the jail and say, everybody's free. You're gone. Get out of here. Everybody is free. And you just say, the whole state of Maryland and the United States of America would say, what are you doing? That is not righteous, right? So how could God do that? He imputed righteousness, but on what grounds? Okay, Abraham believed, but what was required in God? Yeah, Sidoni.
That it pleased the Lord to bruise him, when he shall make his soul an offering to sin.
Wow.
Verse 10 to
Yes. 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 Look at it. It was like this. God is saying, He's saying to His Son, I judge you. You are judged. I am satisfied by you, and I judge you. When He is judged, then there is this thing in law called it's a double jeopardy. It's like once you have paid for your crime, don't pay for it again. And if the crime is paid for by Christ, then we are free. And the Lord is satisfied with that. And that's what the meaning of these words are, this list here. The meaning of the words in general, in a word like Jacob just reduced it down to a sentence. And these words can be, and they have various shades of meaning, but they're basically saying that Christ was the payment for our sin. He took the penalty. He became sin for us. He took our unrighteousnesses, and he was judged at the cross so that we could be saved. And on our part, all we do is believe. Who did the heavy lifting? Jesus did the work. And what is our part? Believing. Why? Why is it only believing? Because it seems that that's the only thing that we really have. There's something in just saying, I believe, that's enough to please God. That's the relationship. Like I said yesterday about my daughter jumping off the top of the car into my arms in the service. And when I would catch her, that was enough for me, that she would trust me. And I put her back on the car, and we had this little game. And the point is that faith means we are trusting in God, and for God to say, that's what I want, because it means we have a relationship. That's what I'm looking for. And I did all the heavy lifting so that you could be as righteous as I am. And that is by my grace, without works. Look at Romans 4:3. For what saith the Scripture? Abraham believed God, and it was counted unto him for righteousness. Now to him that worketh is reward not reckoned of grace, but of debt. Okay, now watch. Here's let's see. How do we say this? Here's a block. And just 1% here, one piece. That's all I have. That's my work. Like God will save me if He does everything except for 1%. That's what I have to do. I have to work. But my problem is that if I have to work, then I'm a debtor. If I have to pay 1% payment, and then I am a debtor. I have something I do, I have to pay. This is Romans 4:4. To him that worketh is the reward not reckoned of grace, but of debt. I am a debtor. If I am a debtor, then it's not by grace. It's not grace if I'm a debtor. Even if I have to work a little bit in order to be saved. By works, I mean the works that we read about in the Old Testament by way of law. If I have to perform in this sense, in order to attain, I just put in my little piece, I am a debtor. I have to pay for it. As small as it may be, the payment is on me. And this is not the teaching of Romans. Romans is 100% has been given to the believer when he does nothing, zero. He does nothing. He believes because he is desperate. He believes he has nothing else he can do but to believe in a loving God. But this believing is not work. This believing is simply believing or trusting. And it is God that gives to us this great gift by His grace. It's said another way in Romans 11, 6. And we'll take our break. I promise you, but we're having a good time here. Romans 11, 6. If by grace it is no more of works, otherwise grace is no more grace. But if it be of works, even a little bit, then it is no more grace. Do you see that? Do you understand that? Even if it's a little bit, my duty is to keep one of the commandments sometimes. If I can keep one of the commandments sometimes, then I will do my part and God does the rest. Here, I'll show you another little lesson here. The word reconciliation. Are you weary? Are you okay? Ready? I'm talking too much now. Oh, Lord, help me. Open my mouth. Okay, here we go. Wait a minute. That's what I'm supposed to do. Okay, I am the teacher. Okay, all right. When you buy a car, you make an offer, $5,000. The price is $8,000. And he'll come down as far as 7. And you say, my highest number is 6.2. And I cannot do anything more. The guy goes 6.7, and you settle at 6.8. Okay, you reconcile by negotiating, arbitrating, working it out. He's moving here and you're moving there. Listen, when God reconciled you, here's you, and here in God and His perfect righteousness, we can draw it this way, God and His perfect righteousness. He didn't say, hey, listen, if you shape up for 6 months, I'm going to give you a little piece of this. And then if you say to God, look at God, I'm going to do my best. And what I know you will, I'll do my best and you do yours. And the Lord said, well, I'll think about it. I'm coming this way. And then you're coming this way. And then somehow you're reconciled. Not the meaning of the Greek word. The Greek word for reconciliation is this one. You have the perfect righteousness of God, and you have the sinner. God comes without asking you, without working on it, without you doing anything. God comes all the way to you to be your friend, and He makes you righteous without your works. Nothing by way of works, not one day, not even 1 second of your righteousness can get you His righteousness. It must be imputed to you completely and totally by the work of Christ on the cross. It's pretty amazing. Not by works. If it is by grace, then it is not by works. The word works meaning, it's not by works, by our efforts. It is by believing as a sinner, I believe, and then it's given to us by His grace, and it's 100%. This is 100% righteousness. 100% righteousness. That's amazing. Without works. Isn't that amazing? Now, I mean, you got to really process this and think about it and understand what it means, because it's very motivating to you. It affects you when you realize what it is, that I am a righteous man by His grace through Christ. Isn't that amazing? Okay. Would anybody like to close before we take our break and just address the class? Yes, Jacob. You've been talking ever since you've been in here today. No, I'm joking.
Is it more like the definition of like almost like a condescending kind of way, instead of like coming down? It sounds more like that kind of word than the other what you gave, like what was the word? Reconciliation. It's more like condescending almost.
Okay.
But not like in a negative meaning.
Okay. I wonder what that word would be. Hey, I'll tell you one thing that brings, I won't answer that question, but I'll make a comment about something that's similar. In a pagan religion, when there was a sinner that came to bring a sacrifice to a pagan god, he would put it on the altar, he put the sacrifice there, and the pagan god needed to be appeased. Appeasing the gods, right? He had to be appeased. So they would put the sacrifice there on the altar, and the god would look down and see the blood or the animal, or unfortunately even a child. And the people would be afraid that the gods were against them, so their pigs would die and they got diseases and so on. So they would go bring a sacrifice to the gods, or God, whoever they feared. And when the God looked down and was satisfied, this is called propitiation. Propitiation. It means the God was satisfied. This is in paganism. It means this way, the sacrifice is enough. That Jesus is enough to God. That God is propitiated or satisfied. And God looks at His Son and say, I'm satisfied, and then you get His righteousness. God will say, that is enough for me. My Son's blood, I am satisfied with my Son. I am satisfied. I am not angry with you anymore. I am not judging you. You are free. Because of my Son. My Son propitiated my anger, my wrath, my judgment, and so now you are free. It's like the bird that went free in the Levitical sacrifice of the atoning blood sacrifice in Leviticus 13. It's like Barabbas goes free and Jesus is crucified. And that man goes free as a criminal because God gives grace to the ungodly in Romans 5. In the man, and we are imputed with it. I'm not saying Barabbas was saved, but it's right there written in the story as a graphic picture of how a guilty man can go free when the innocent man is given judgment and satisfies God's heart and says, now I can pour out my grace on people because I love them and I am satisfied. That's a great principle to think about. Yes, Sidoni? Yeah.
Exactly what you just explained.
You want to read it? Isaiah 53:11. You have it there? Yeah, I will see his soul, right? And by his knowledge, He is satisfying me. Can you read it?
He shall see of the travail of his soul, and shall be satisfied, and by his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities.
Beautiful. I will be satisfied, and by his knowledge, like Jesus went to the cross by knowledge, and by his knowledge he will justify many by his sacrifice in going to the cross. So we are made righteous. Okay? And you are made righteous. Wow. Okay, so enjoy your break. You got 15 minutes. And oh, this was beautiful. I enjoyed this class. It was good. Give Jacob a hand. Jacob.